Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, all of you. Thank you very much for being here. Admiral Smith, good to see you again. I wanted to stay on the topic that Senator Collins raised and ask the flip side of it, coming from the perspective of a state with a private shipyard. I'm very supportive of the efforts to try to make up for this deferred maintenance at our public shipyards, but as we know, that's a long-term project, and even if you stay on schedule, the Navy has projected that there's going to be a large percentage of maintenance work that just simply won't be able to be done at the public shipyards, and thus it brings me to my question. As you know, we've got this workload valley in Connecticut at Electric Boat as we seek to ramp up to the point at which we're going to be producing at many times 2 submarines in that yard at any one given time. And we are very worried about the likelihood of losing some really important skilled workforce during that period of valley. And so we've talked previously about maintenance projects like the Boise, and I'm glad that that contract got awarded to the wrong shipyard, but Virginia does decent work as well. Question is just this: wouldn't it be wise to fill this private yard workforce valley now with some backlog maintenance to make sure that that trained workforce is there when we have that ramp up as the Columbia starts to come into view?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. And, sir, it's good to see you again. And yet, obviously, the readiness of our fleet is number one priority, and also the skill and the talent of our nuclear repair force in both our public yards and our private yards. I know that the Navy is looking now at how, we look at how to properly balance across our public yards, and I know we're looking to how to potentially use the private yards. And if I may, I'd like to take the remainder of that question for the record and get back to you with more detail.
Be happy to do that. My second question is still focused on Groton and New London, and I'll bring in Secretary Niemeyer for this one. This is a really good study that was done by the Navy regarding the housing situation in southeastern Connecticut. And so wanted to just get your thoughts on how the Navy and the Department of Defense can continue to work with us in southeastern Connecticut to solve what is going to not be a crisis but a challenge moving forward, because as you're aware, the Navy's going to start production on Columbia in 2021. It's considering adding a 3rd Virginia class. And so you're going to have 2 boats under construction, and each boat is going to have a pre-commissioning crew of about 250. Thus, conservatively, we're talking about an additional 500 families, not to mention all the junior sailors that are coming in. At the same time, the DB is ramping up production, so you're requiring more and more workforce housing. So this report is a good start, but I wanted to ask you about plans to do a broader analysis of the impacts expected over the next few decades on southeastern Connecticut, and wanted to ask for your commitment to work with us to try to come up with some really good plans to make sure that we have adequate housing for all of the Navy personnel that are going to be on site. I understand your book is not to make sure the DB has private sector housing, but their ramp up is going to affect the availability of affordable housing for Navy personnel as well.
Yes, Senator, thank you. Well, given that my nephew works at DB, I'm also interested. Yeah, but no, you have my commitment. I was actually on the phone yesterday with the executive officer for the base talking just about housing. So, yes, you have our commitment as we move forward to make sure that we're working together to make sure we can help solve what is potentially a housing challenge here in the future.
Secretary Niemeyer.
Yep. And so what we also have at the OSD level, we have the Office of Economic Adjustment that allows us to work with communities and states to look at, collectively, what does an increase in DoD activity, potentially what can we do to mitigate the impacts, to work with the community to see what improvements can be made, and look forward to using that office to work with you on assessing what potentially can be done in Southeast Connecticut.
We're ready. As you know, the state has made unprecedented investments in the sub base, and we're going to do whatever is necessary to make sure that we have what our Navy workforce and our private sector workforce needs. But doing that in coordination with both of you and others is helpful. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to the committee.
One thing, Senator Murphy, I do appreciate the opportunity to testify before the next generation. My 17-year-old son would be asleep by now, so it's a testament.
I'm gonna ask him how I did when I'm done here. So, thanks, guys.